There is no way. It shows, for one, the government can't sell it.
Today, oh no, the moment Julia Gillard's colleagues saw the price of her latest disaster.
My son-in-law just lost his job on Friday. Can't drive a cattle truck anymore.
But who'd replace Gillard? Peter Reith and John Della Bosca discuss. Senator Barnaby Joyce on the Greens' new power and their latest mad plans. And what is it with global warming activists and waxing? I'm Andrew Bolt, and this is the Bolt Report. This week may have sealed Julia Gillard's fate. The Prime Minister tells Labor she needs maybe a year to turn things around, settle fears about her carbon dioxide tax. Small problem. That assumes she won't make even more mistakes. But on Wednesday, her ministers saw for themselves the fallout from Gillard's latest disaster, her killing of our live cattle exports to Indonesia. The ministers were at a community cabinet meeting in Darwin where people hurt by Gillard's bungling let her have it.
My son-in-law just lost his job on Friday. Can't drive a cattle truck anymore. No cattle.
What are you doing to remedy the terrible situation?
I'm a vet who specialises in cattle production. That's 25,000 cows and their calves dying of starvation because of your decision.
Yet another government shambles. Once again, it was caught flat-footed, this time by reports showing Australian cattle being brutally killed in Indonesia. Once again, it panicked, suspending exports to all Indonesia's abattoirs rather than just the bad ones. It's destroyed the industry. Think Indonesia will rely on us again for its food? Meanwhile, cattle caught in this ban may be shot by farmers who can't afford to feed them. And the dithering. At first, Gillard wouldn't promise farmers compensation, then she gave $3 million, then $30 million. But Bullo River Station's Marley Ranaher, daughter of author Sarah Henderson, says her $5,000 handout won't feed her cattle.
So if I were to divide that 5,000 between my 8,000 cows, it works out to about 62 cents I have per head over a month. So that's 2 cents a day.
And where's Foreign Minister Kevin Rudd been? Not in Indonesia sorting out this mess, but in Equatorial Guinea, Kazakhstan and Burma. He's deserted his post, or in fact been told by Gillard not to show her up by fixing her disasters. It's a circus. By the end of the week, Gillard was so rattled she even tried to pretend her carbon dioxide tax wasn't a tax.
What Tony Abbott likes to refer to as a carbon tax.
And next day, a fast backtrack.
I'm happy to say, yes, it works effectively like a tax.
One more reason for voters to think Gillard is dishonest. Labor must now realise the more time it gives her to fix her mistakes, the more time she has to make more. No wonder there's now talk of replacing her. Assistant Treasurer Bill Shorten has been the favourite. Defence Minister Stephen Smith looks keen. But Simon Crean has been a competent Labor leader before, and at least seems an adult. But watch Rudd. He's popular enough to be brought back at the last desperate minute. Now, before this week, Julia Gillard could still have banked on clinging on. But now? On Friday, the Greens grabbed the balance of power in the Senate when 4 Green senators elected at the last election joined the 5 already there. Leader Bob Brown is now telling us his plans, like he'll scrap all our coal mines.
You know, the coal industry has to be replaced by renewables.
And, well, cop this.
Why shouldn't we now join vigorous moves in Europe and at the United Nations for a global people's assembly based on one person, one vote, one value? Such a global parliament, and it could be right here in Australia.
Joining me is the Leader of the Nationals in the Senate, Barnaby Joyce. Barnaby, what will change with the Greens having this extra power?
Well, what we've seen already, Andrew, is they're basically in coalition. Bob Brown is sometimes the Deputy Prime Minister, sometimes the Prime Minister, take your choice. I think Bob Brown undersells himself when he says that one day he'll be in the Lodge. For all intents and purposes, Andrew, he's already there. But let's what their agenda is. They want to shut down the live cattle trade, and the complete and utter fiasco that's created for our nation will be a permanent state of affairs. They want to shut down the Murray-Darling Basin, 7,600 gigs, so Australia can no longer feed itself. They want to shut down everything in between with a new carbon tax. In fact, they think the carbon tax does not go far enough and the price has to go up. They want to shut down rodeos. They want to shut down fishing. They want to bring in a more liberal drug policy, which is pick a house in your street and call it an injecting room. They believe in death duties. We took years to try and get rid of death duties. They want to bring it back. They believe in a top rate of tax of 50 cents on the dollar. And these people, with this and so much more, they believe... I always have to fight the right-wing conspiracy theorists who believe in one world government, but Bob Brown gets out there and basically confirms it. It's bizarre.
It's strange to me, Barnaby, but what does this say about the electorate that they would vote for a party like this in the extent that they do? What does it say about the media that Bob Brown can do this one world government shtick and no one seems to blink an eye?
Well, what it says is that, you know, he's gone from a convenient, well-meaning, alternate view. He was, you know, warm and fuzzy, nice and cuddly, but now you've actually got him in a position of power where he can extract the requirements of his policy platform and put them against the Australian people. Now, I have a lot of people who have said, oh, well, I vote for the Greens because I just want to sort of make a protest because I believe it's different. I've also met people who said, I voted for Pauline Hanson and then I voted for the Greens. But now you've actually got to understand that Bob Brown is like the Greens version, the left-hand's version of the National Party. He has a substantial say in the policy direction of our nation, and that direction will take us to, I don't know where, content hunters and gatherers on the forest floor eating beetles and nuts. But before we get there, we all go broke. You've got to remember, if Bob Brown believes in shutting down the coal mines, he believes in shutting down one of the major exports of our nation. And so you have to ask yourself, to be honest, Bob Brown, what else are you going to shut down because now we don't have the money? Are you going to shut down the hospitals? Are you going to shut down the schools? Are you going to get rid of the pharmaceutical benefit scheme so people have to pay the proper and appropriate and extremely excessive price for medicines?
Well, he's already managed to force on the government this carbon dioxide tax. Today we hear the government's going to try and minimise the political fallout by exempting petrol, which means we've got to save the world by cutting emissions, but not quite yet.
Well, let's look at this. And this is the ultimate tactic of the Labor Party, this sort of post hoc ergo propter hoc type of argument where they say, you must thank me because of instead of killing all the pets, I'm only going to and the birds. We're going to leave the cats alone. You know, why don't you just leave everything alone, Bob Brown? Why don't you leave everything alone, Julia Gillard, to go out to people and say, we are not going to inflict a ridiculous tax on your petrol. We're just going to inflict this ridiculous tax on everything else you do. It is not a saving grace. It just accentuates the insult of what this carbon tax is. It is not going to change the climate. It is not going to do anything to the temperature of the globe.
But
it is merely a mechanism to make you poorer.
Barnaby, nor are the coalition's policies, are they? Billions spent, no change to the climate.
I agree. It's not going to change the temperature of the globe either. What I can say is at least you have the capacity to do other advantageous things. You can put money on the table and say, well, if you're going to develop a new internal combustion engine that is more efficient than the one we've got, good. That is good for us, good for you, good for everybody.
Sounds like so government picking winners like that sounds like a potential waste of time, Barnaby. But look, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Andrew.
And coming up, Peter Reith and John Della Bosca on Gillard's troubled week and Reith's own strike.